Your resilience is your humanity, to yield and not break. That is incredible strength. This quote speaks of the power of resilience in the face of adversity. Courageous women world over have changed the world and made it a better place. In Zimbabwe, Mbuya Nehanda lit the flame of courage that inspired the liberation of Zimbabwe from colonial rule. Born in 1840 in the Chishawasha area of Mashonaland Central, Mbuya Nehanda was to become one of the inspirational leaders of the Chimurenga uprising in the 1890s. As a revered spirit medium, her influence was instrumental in mobilizing blacks in the then Rhodesia to stage the first Chimurenga. The white settlers were rattled by her influence in the uprisings and sentenced her to death by hanging. As she was led to her last breath, she shouted her last words, "My bones shall rise." These words became the pillar of the second Chimurenga, which brought forth Zimbabwe's independence. She became an inspiration to other Zimbabwean women to fight for what is right. In this installment, we look at courageous women in politics who have stood up against injustices and remained resolute to make Zimbabwe a better nation.
Kusungwa chisi chakanaka and kutongonziwo musungwa arizi izwi rakanaka mukati meupenyu hwemunhu. Inini I think chekutanga ndechekuti anenga nyanyire kuti ndakanyanyo affectwa neprison kunyanya, because inini ndinofila kuti prison yakandidzidzisa zvinhu zvakawanda. Prison yakandiratidza zvinhu zvakawanda. Chekutanga politically, prison yakandiratidza kuti you can never be a leader in your country usati wambopfuura nemujere munyika yakwako, nekuti unozokwanisa sei kuziva zvakaitika mune zvakawandika, because muprison mune zvinhu zvakawandika zvatisingazive, zvausingazive iwe Lucky, because hausati wambopindamo zvokugara imomo. But inini ndinozvitora as a positive thing to be there, because ndakakwanisa kuona zviri kuitika zvisingakwanisi kuzikanwa namwana veZimbabwe. Politically zvinondipa picture yekuti kune vanhu vanongofunga kuti kungoita slogan ndokurwira musangano, of which inini ndakaona kuti kupinda mukati meprison ndokurwira musangano, ndokurwira nyika yekwangu, and ndinokwanisa kuchibuda muprison ndichinotaura zvandakaona nezvandakadzidza. Ndakadzidza kuti kune hama neshamwari dzinogona kukuda uri panze pano tichionana zvatiri kuita izvi, asi kana wamukati havafi vakatsika paunenge uri wakaomerwa. Ndakadzidza kuti kune mapolitical leaders ekutoti kuti aziye musuwo wejeri kungosvika nekungosvika pagedhi pafenzi ungokuti hai vokusiya woenda wakadaro.
Justina Makoko is a Zimbabwean human rights defender and director of the Zimbabwe Peace Project. On the 3rd of December 2008, Justina Makoko was abducted from her house for allegedly being involved in plans for anti-government protests. She was tortured for several days, only to appear in court on the 24th of December on allegations of attempting to recruit people for military training to overthrow the government. Her case dragged on until the 21st of September 2009, when the Supreme Court ordered a permanent stay of criminal proceedings against Justina.
I think initially when it all happened, first I was very angry, but I realized that the anger was not going to help me in any way. I decided to begin to tell my story. I have told my story quite widely, including publishing a book that details my experience. So what I have realized is that if you continue in the mode where you are angry and where you've got a lot of pain with you, you make the perpetrators happy because that's what they wanted. Immediately after the abduction, I was back at work. A lot of people were surprised. People were asking me, were you not fired at your place of work? I said I had not committed any crime. So I started to work on the work that ZPP does, which is monitoring and documenting human rights abuses. And you will also appreciate that with that kind of work, there was a lot of crossing of paths with the system. And obviously, in most cases, they would deny some of the incidences that we highlighted. But because we did strict verification, we stood by what we produced. So I would like to say it has also kind of transformed me into someone who is strong, someone who can stand up for their rights, someone who can advocate for the rights of others. And this is where I am at the moment. I think I've been quite open and frank in terms of what happened to me. They might have been angry about me talking about it because I had been told that I was not supposed to be talking about it. But in terms of politics, party politics, that has never been my game.
Linda Masarira is a woman politician and human rights activist who has shown tremendous courage in the face of political persecution. During the Mugabe era, Linda was incarcerated for more than 80 days for leading demonstrations against the deteriorating state of living in the country. During her incarceration at Chikurubi Maximum Prison, she organized a protest against the inhumane state of the prison and lack of sanitary pads. She was thrown into solitary confinement until she was granted bail by the High Court.
There was the issue to do with the food, which was not fit for human consumption. The maize was usually rotten, and they would give people cabbage with no cooking oil, no salt. It was quite unhuman until such a time I'd been able to convince other prisoners for us to protest. And we protested against the poor living conditions, the poor food, and the way in general that the prison officers were treating prisoners, which was quite inhuman and a violation of human rights that are universally declared. So after we protested, I was taken out of the female prison and sent to Chikurubi Maximum Prison, where I was living in solitary confinement in a very small cell that had no lights, with the toilet that was flushed once a day. And I think maybe at that particular time they really wanted to kill my spirit once and for all, that I would say I'm going to stop doing politics, I'm going to stop doing any form of activism. But that actually inspired me more, because I said to myself, if I'm going to stop now, people are going to continue suffering, being put into these conditions which are not fit for human beings. I had to persevere, I had to soldier on, I had to go on. I went on a hunger strike, I was afraid of dying, I didn't know what they were going to do to me, and I really lost a lot of weight, I got sick, until such a time when they called in my lawyers, Obey Shava and Jacob Mafume, and then that was the only time I really started eating until I got released on bail. But when I was released, I was already frail, but I picked up the pieces and said, I have to fight on. And when I got out, I fought for all those prisoners who had overstayed in remand in prison because they had no representation, they had no relatives coming from them, and they managed to get bail. And time and again, I still continue supporting women in prison in Zimbabwe. This experience taught me that I need to get myself into a position of influence so that I can turn around the standards, especially in our correctional services. It also inspired me to do politics, to be able to get to a level at some point in my life where I'll be able to influence the laws that we have in this country. I am now an avid thinker, especially when it comes to legal reforms, judicial reforms, and governance system reforms. And I think that all this was aided by the experiences that I went through as an activist during the days where I was incarcerated, where I had a lot of cases that were just piled on me, even though I had committed no crime. But my only crime was just being the voice of the voiceless. So for me, the struggle continues unabated. There's a lot of work that we still need to do. It is not yet uhuru.
These women have indeed made an impact in the politics of Zimbabwe and the way women are perceived. Where do they find the courage to be so fearless?
I think I have just been inspired by being around people. When I faced my ordeal, I recognized the extent to which Zimbabweans went out of their way to even pray for me, even people that did not know me. I once met an old man who broke down when he saw me. And he started to tell me about how his wife and him would pray for me on a daily basis. And I had never met them in my life. And I think you are aware that that concern was not limited to the borders of Zimbabwe. It went to the region, the continent, and worldwide. And I can tell you, Jimmy Carter spoke in my corner. Organizations like Amnesty International spoke in my corner. I can actually talk about a 5-year-old Amnesty International member who sat down to write me a letter, just to say, we know what you are going through and it is going to end. And when you are going through it, you actually don't see any end in sight. But it's when you then sit back and realize the extent to which people put their heads on the block. And for me, that inspired me a lot. And I told myself that I also needed to give back by speaking courageously and amplifying my voice on behalf of those whose rights were being violated. So just seeing someone wear a smile because they have been assisted, that is a huge inspiration for me. So that keeps me going. And I think what also strengthens me is my faith. Because that's what helped me pull through those 21 days when some people actually thought I had been killed. Even I believed that I could be killed because I had been threatened with extinction. So my faith also keeps me very grounded and knowing what I want to do.
My source of inspiration is serving humanity and leaving a legacy that at least I tried to change something during my lifetime. It is said that a lot of gallant sons and daughters of this land lost their lives fighting for freedom, fighting for land, and fighting for justice. But 44 years after independence, we are still struggling for the same land, same justice, and same freedom. We've got a long way to go, and I believe that as long as Zimbabweans have not attained that, I still have a lot of work to do, and I do not have to tire. And some of these things, I think you're just born like that. You're just born to serve. You're just born to ensure that everyone lives a life that is free from fear and want, and that everyone has got the ability to express themselves, to be themselves, and live their lives with their own freedom of conscience.
Courageous women have continued to fight for the realization of a better Zimbabwe where everyone is treated with dignity and equality. Despite the humiliation and abuse these women face in their pursuit for justice and equality, they never give up. Their resolve is strengthened by the pain that is inflicted on them. Every day they face a patriarchal political system that commits towards silencing their voices, but they refuse to be silenced. Zimbabwe has a long list of such women who deserve to be honored. A mention of this few is just but a gesture to honor each and every courageous woman who is committed to fighting for a better Zimbabwe.